Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Your purchase and pricing email question line for buying this or any watch you see on any Watchbox platform. Reach out to me directly for pricing at tmosso@thewatchbox.com. Today, we're discussing the earliest example of the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra. This is the design as it debuted in the 2002 launch year for the collection, which largely replaced the long-running Seamaster 120s. So this is the Aqua Terra in steel at 39.2 millimeters in diameter, 11.4 millimeters thick, 47 millimeters from lug to lug, and has a 20 millimeter spacing between the lugs. These early Aqua Terras are exceptionally thin, especially compared to what would follow. You can see that it's reasonably constrained across the wrist. I would recommend this watch for a wrist as small as 13.5 centimeters circumference, and my wrist is 16 centimeters circumference. It's easy to wear under a cuff. A sub 12 millimeter thickness on a coaxial Omega in our day and age, almost unheard of. But back then, these watches were actually competitive with Rolex in that regard. They're real slim. We'll look at that in a moment. The strap is remarkably substantial. You can see it is a sort of reddish brown, large rectangular scale alligator leather with a matte finish, a contrasting stitch, a lot of bolstering to give it thickness and volume, sheer cut sides, and you can appreciate that it is calfskin on the bottom and a brand new Omega factory strap. We have this long-running Omega clasp design. It's a twin trigger release, so it can't open accidentally. And then you'll appreciate that internally, it's all of high polish, just as it is externally. There is some satination internally. And what happens is you tuck the strap in, you buckle it in place, and then there's no need for minder loops externally. All the excess length hides underneath the clasp. So the clasp, with its twin triggers, stays shut resolutely, and with its sizing mechanism, cleans up the look of the watch on your wrist. Now, it has a traditional Omega lyre-style lug case, which means you have twisting bevels both inboard and outboard, with the outboard bevels being polished. Mid-case is satinated, the bezel is conical and polished, and then here we have a screw-down crown. The watch is 150 meters water resistant. The dial is what some, such as Patek Philippe, would call an opaline, a very fine, matte, frosted silver white. We have steel hands that are rose gold plated with Omega logo marquee and indices to match, but the detailing of the indices is quite handsome. As you can see, they're nicely faceted, and the detail of the faceting is quite nuanced. We have a little stepped date window for the date, so you don't have a sheer cut through the dial. You have that little slope downward, and then you have the disc itself. So the watch does include a quick set system for the date. You can rapidly cycle the date should the watch run down or encounter an irregular length month. And you can also hack the watch and stop the movement, and then set it precisely to a reference time. So you have those functions just like you would on an ETA 2892A2, and that forms the basis for this movement here. This is the 2500 Bravo. It was the second generation caliber 2500. Caliber 2500 was developed from Omega 1120. Omega 1120 was a 2892A2. So changes here, well, quite a few of them. The 1120 had 23 joules and a 44-hour power reserve. This has 27 joules and a 48-hour power reserve. It's also free sprung rather than having a mobile index, making it a little bit more shock tolerant. It is 5-position adjusted and chronometer certified, just like the 1120, but it has a coaxial escapement, as this movement represented the debut of George Daniels' tangential contact direct and indirect impulse system that he developed during the 70s, shopped to everyone during the 80s and 90s, and eventually sold to Omega, which was willing to take a chance and industrialize this exotic mechanism. And this remains a high horology mechanism to this day. There's not a whole lot under 50,000 of comparable sophistication to the Omega coaxial. So what we have here is all the features I just delineated: chronometer certified, coaxial escapement, 48-hour power reserve, free sprung, 5-position adjusted, 27 joules, and water resistant down to 150 meters. Now, it's not common on these caliber 2500 Omegas to be able to see the movement. For the most part, they were solid case back later on. In the early years of the 2500, though, Omega was very, very proud of the coaxial. So even though these movements are ETA based, it wanted you to be able to see that for which you paid, as it was justifiably quite impressive and something Omega wanted to advertise at the time. Reach out to tmosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details of this extremely early Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra.